We're keeping as much information up to date as possible, so I just wanted to stress that.
Absolutely. Of course, James, thank you so much. We are now 2 hours away from that mandatory evacuation taking effect in Lafourche Parish. So if you are out here in the area, get your last minute goods and shelter in place. Reporting live, Leah McNeil, WWL, Louisiana.
Thank you for that information, Leah. And to that point that James made there down in Lafourche Parish, the parish governments are keeping everyone up to speed for the most part on their social media pages as a lot of those updates are being made available. We're keeping up with them there, and also area residents are posting a lot of their comments and questions too, particularly in terms of what they're seeing in their municipality. So just a good resource to follow as we do track the storm.
Yeah, giving us a lot of good information there. And continuing with our coverage here, we're going to go to
Brooke now.
Brooke Glazer, who's got the very latest with our update on the forecast and exactly what we're seeing here.
Live in person. Of course, also the weather company, weatherboarding, we are doing here at Ntwc Plus. Dr. Hal Eden's going to join us in a little bit. He is in Galveston. He is headed to the seawall, so he'll have an update from what's happening there right now. And Bill Ringo, Bill, former director of the National Hurricane Center, and Bill,
I'm WWL-TV Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin, and this is how we prepare for severe weather. I work directly with our news team so you know how to prepare and keep your family safe. I use my education and a lifetime in Southeast Louisiana to create a forecast you can trust. It is vital to have accurate information when severe weather is headed our way. The forecasts are fact-based, they aren't hyped, and you're going to get the information you need to know.
Trust Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin, weeknights at 6 on WWL-TV.
Looks like Hal's trying to come in.
I'm moving on.
You can tell there's a massive storm out there in the
Hey, I'm WWL-TV Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin. Come on and spend the day with me.
From planning the week to getting the kids out the door, we need reliable forecasts.
The kids are in school, now I'm going back to school.
Every day I use my degree in meteorology and my lifetime here in Louisiana to break down the data and deliver the information you need to know. All right, I've run the models, I've made my forecast, now it's showtime.
Trust Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin, weeknights at 6 on WWL-TV.
I'm WWL-TV Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin, and this is how we prepare for severe weather. I work directly with our news team so you know how to prepare and keep your family safe. I use my education and a lifetime in Southeast Louisiana to create a forecast you can trust. It is vital to have accurate information when severe weather is headed our way. The forecasts are fact-based, they aren't hyped, and you're going to get the information you need to know.
Trust Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin, weeknights at 6 on WWL-TV. This is a severe weather alert from WWL Weather, sponsored by Egan Insurance Agency.
All right, welcome back here at 10:03 is the time as we are rolling right along. I cannot believe it's already 10 in the morning. And for any of you who maybe stayed up really late and are just waking up, hi, yes, we're still here.
Yeah.
Still here, happy to be here as well to keep you updated on everything you need to know as we continue to track Hurricane Francine. Again, I'm Brianna Boudreau.
And I'm Brandon Walker. A pleasure to be with you here as we gather the latest information. Our crew stationed throughout the area, from the Bayou parishes to the river parishes, also the New Orleans metro area. We do have you covered here with crew stationed all that they need to be as we track the arrival of Hurricane Francine, scheduled somewhere between 5 and 7 o'clock this evening.
Yeah, so with that, I know we said it a couple minutes ago and then we took a quick break, so we are going to check in now with Brooke Glazer, who's got the very latest on our track here of Francine. Good morning. We do have the 10 o'clock update in from the National Hurricane Center, and the good news is there aren't a lot of changes. So the winds have stayed at 90 miles an hour, which is still Category 1 classification. And now we're seeing that potential to stay at a Category 1 as the storm makes landfall around 5 to 7 o'clock. So that's in just under 8 hours here across the Louisiana coastline. Track has really not shifted much at all. We're still seeing it coming coming inland in St. Mary or Terrebonne around 7 p.m. Now, you'll notice that the storm actually picked up a little bit of speed, 1 more mile per hour. Instead of 12, it's now moving at 13. But as we continue to see it move out of the Gulf and inland, we are going to watch for that additional dry air, which is going to break up the intensity. So that's really the primary reason that we're not seeing that classification on Category 2 at landfall. As we continue to look at the 210-mile radius off of the coast of New Orleans, we want you to make sure you're finishing those impacts and really starting to hunker down wherever you're going to end up riding out the storm itself. By noon, you should be in your safe place or at home and just parking it until tomorrow around daybreak. Here are our watches and warnings in effect across the area. We've got the hurricane warnings here in red, and then our tropical storm warnings in orange, and you're also seeing that hurricane watch a little bit further inland. So want to just point that out for the New Orleans metro, because we're not far off of the landfall here. Within the next couple of hours, you'll start to see impacts as well on the coastline, moving then into the metro and eventually the North Shore. Now, as these outer bands start to get a little bit closer, we are going to ramp up that overall tornado threat. And remember, these are tropical in nature, so they're brief, weak spin-ups. You see that marginal risk along the center line and off to the west, with the primary slight risk and bigger concern to the eastern side of the center wherever it moves inland. So here's your breakdown for storm surge warnings, pretty much flying across the coast, and we continue with those highest amounts down towards the center as it makes its way inland, which you can see from Morgan City all the way east toward Grand Isle. 5 to 10 feet of storm surge possible. That's taller than you yourself, and of course surge is very impossible to outrun. So hopefully you've secured all boats. In Grand Isle, 4 to 7 feet, so we come down a little bit, and then up towards Lake Pontchartrain, we've adjusted that to 4 to 6. Off towards the east, similar numbers. The North Shore, though, anywhere from 3 to 5 feet. So here's the rainfall concern. We've been talking about this all morning. I know you've heard Peyton say wherever that center and the northern portion of the storm move inland on the eye wall, we're going to see the possibility for almost a foot of rain in a short amount of time. Right now, the models have that setting up close to Houma and Raceland. That would not be an ideal scenario for...
Come on, don't tell me. There we go. This is a radar loop courtesy of NSSL's MRMS system, roughly a 3-hour loop. And this, as you can see, the eye is fairly distinct today, except it's open to the south. That's because of the dry air that is on the south side of the storm. For quite a while now, the rain shield and the rain bands have been coming into Louisiana, so I'm sure the rain is becoming an issue. The rainwater runoff as the tides come up over in that area. And we'll watch that the rest of the day as it gets closer to land. Still have a plane out there. Let me update it. Maybe it's getting close to the end of its mission too. But you can see there, the purples are hurricane force winds, and pretty much the entire circulation appears to maybe just on the extreme west side there that doesn't have hurricane force winds, but elsewhere we do have the hurricane force winds, and they go out a fair distance here on the east side of the center. Kind of exciting on the rigs. They're automated observations. I'm pretty sure all the crew have been evacuated from there, given the fairly decent lead time they had on the forecast of a hurricane. This rig here at 98 feet up, the anemometer, and they had 105-mile-an-hour gusts within the last couple of hours out on it. 96 on the one down here. Looks like the anemometer took a hiccup now on this one, so I don't know what their peak was there. But it's nice to have all these rigs out here. It wasn't too many years ago. There was nothing out there unless you had the reconnaissance on what was going on down on the deck. These will become more important for the folks in Louisiana. And Hal, how about if you jump in here and talk about what the impact of the fact that this is moving to the northeast into the Louisiana coast, what the different scenario will be is how the surge evolves over here in southeast Louisiana.
Yeah, Bill, I'd love to talk about that. And that's, I think, the one big potential surprise with Francine. Typically, we're getting hurricanes approach this area from the south or from the southeast. So you're getting a prolonged east wind along the eastern shore or the eastern edge of the Mississippi River Delta in Lake Pontchartrain in Mississippi Sound. But then when you get west of the Mississippi River, places like Grand Isle, Morgan City, Homa, they actually usually are shielded from some of the storm surge. So we've had some big hits in this area before. I'm thinking back to Ida in 2021, Andrew in 1992, and the surges just didn't really materialize. You can go back as well to the 1915 hurricane, where we had 13 feet of surge in Lake Pontchartrain, 13 feet on the east of the Mississippi River. Down by Grand Isle, it was only 7 feet. It almost looks like an error in the map. It's not. Usually that area to the west of the Mississippi River is somewhat shielded, but this time it's not going to be. It's going to be a different surge pattern because we're getting this unusual track in from the southwest. So places like Morgan City, Homa, Grand Isle, you may see a surprisingly high storm surge in there. In fact, some areas could actually see a higher surge from Francine than you saw from Ida 3 years ago, and it's not going to make sense because you're going to say the winds with Ida were so much stronger. But again, this track coming in from the southwest, I think it could surprise people getting west of the Mississippi River Delta. Also, the other thing I could mention, when you're in Lake Pontchartrain, Mississippi Sound, this is also going to be unusual for you because typically you're getting saltwater rise for at least 18 hours before the eye shows up. In this case, if you're in Lake Pontchartrain, Mississippi Sound, you're not really seeing much at all. But we're looking back to what we saw in Hurricane Zeta in 2020. Once that wind field crosses the Delta and gets over Lake Pontchartrain, or if part of that even tropical storm force wind field gets into Mississippi Sound, you can see a very rapid water rise in a short amount of time. This is not the highest storm surge by far that you've ever seen in a place like the Mississippi Sound, but what you get will likely come in really quickly late in the game. So don't let your guard down. That's what we saw on the ground with Hurricane Zeta. People were saying it was an 8-10 foot surge, but it came in incredibly quick. That's one of the concerns with this storm as we're talking here about storm surge.
Yeah, the tides everywhere are up about 2 feet right now in the area of interest. So I think it'll be quick everywhere. But anyway, thanks, Hal. Let's see what the new forecast looks like. Trouble that's coming on at 10 o'clock, Alex and Tim. We end up trying to get the data at the last second. Okay, no real changes. It's going to maintain the track and intensity as it was forecast, as a previous forecast. So we're looking at landfall somewhere in the vicinity of 0Z this evening as a category 1, maybe 2, maybe pushing a 2 as it reaches there. Not going to make much difference one way or another. It's just a data point at that part. For those that are unfamiliar with the area here are some of the towns that it's going to come in somewhere between Marsh Island and south of Morgan City from the looks of things right now. So all these towns along US 90, a lot of them are unprotected from storm surge. So as Hal was pointing out, there could be a real problem in those areas. We're outside the levee system in there. As far as the thinking on the dry air and the shear, this is from the model that confirms what's on the satellite from this morning, starting out at 12Z. The mean layer moisture is shown here. Brown is dry, green is moist, and the wind barbs are the mean wind across that layer. And already you can see there's a strong westerly shear working on the storm, especially to the south of the center. And it's bringing in this dry air from the continental ridge off to the west is now being entrained into the system. And it fits very well with what we saw on the radar and what the recon reporting as far as no convection on the south side. And you step this forward, by tonight, the storm is on land and all the moisture is now displaced to the north side of it, and the strong wind shear comes in. And shortly after landfall, and this is why the Hurricane Center is expecting a very quick demise of Francine. The dry air is going to, and the shear combined are going to pretty much tear it apart. And there's really just a one pocket of moisture still in there was it stalls. I wouldn't completely rule out heavy rain up in there. It'd be worth keeping an eye on, but it won't be like what we see with some of the ones that stall right along the Gulf Coast without dry air. This is the forecast inundation for the storm surge event they'll have on here. And it, as you can see, that as Hal pointed out, the highest values look to be up in the area from Port Fourchon westward to Vermilion Bay, and still some pretty good tides. Probably exactly what Hal was talking about, come up quickly at the landfall, and as the strongest winds come around to the south and southwest up in that area. Peak surges 5 to 10 feet in the main area of interest near where the eye wall comes inland, and then tapering off elsewhere. But notice that as far east as the westernmost part of the Florida Panhandle, we expect 1 to 2 feet of surge, and in Alabama, Mobile Bay, maybe 2 to 4 feet. So there's quite a bit. We've probably got 2 feet, and are pretty close to maxing out on the upper Texas coast as we speak right now. What else? Oh yeah, the rainfall forecast. It's with the dry air and the fast movement. It's not nearly as high a rainfall forecast as we normally see with a landfalling storm on the Gulf Coast. But I think it's still a pretty good forecast, and especially for these areas along the coast now, they've probably already gotten several inches of rain up until the time this forecast was created. So add this onto it, so 6 to 8 on top of there. There'll probably be some peak values approaching a foot or more here in southeast Louisiana. Waves. Hal was talking about the waves. The hurricane's generating some 25 to 30 foot waves under the strongest winds there, and that propagates out in towards our coast there. When those winds come around to the north and we get the long period swells, all the surfers will come out to catch what's left of the waves tomorrow here along the Texas coast. But certainly no surf parties here in Louisiana. There'll be wave action on top of the risen tide. As far as how the forecast has been going, it's actually, other than minor details from my point of view, I think it's gone quite well. From the onset, the anticipation was that it would slowly drift north and wouldn't really get developed till it was southeast of Brownsville, and then shoot northeast and make landfall somewhere in Louisiana. The trend has been it was farther west at the onset of the forecast process, and it's trended with a couple of back and forths in the middle there, but it's been trending further to the east until it locked on last night to the track we're on now. Intensity forecasts, I haven't really looked at very much for verification, but I don't think they've been that bad. There was some concern about some RI in there, but we may have had a brief period that approached RI, but all told, it was probably not. Elsewhere, the reason I updated that is that they tell us, they put a headline up on their website that they're going to start initiating advisories now on what is Tropical Depression 7. These other areas I'll get to first. Only a 30% chance on one in the middle of the tropical Atlantic, and only 10% on another area, low pressure out to its east or west. And then this weekend, there's what initially looks like a frontal low developing, a strong high pressure parked up over here, a frontal Brown and Bear Clinic zone, but it's settling up over the Gulf Stream, so it might, if it hangs in there as the models show, it looks like it gains some subtropical storm characteristics as time marches on. Too far out in advance to get crazy with that one yet. See what they're doing with this one. Well, not much either, even though it's peak of the season and it's in prime territory. The first 5 days of its life are forecast to be a tropical storm heading slowly but steadily off to the west-northwest. From the longer range models I was looking at, doesn't look like it'll be a Gulf system. Maybe everything we'll have this year has to be homegrown. We'll see. Here's the satellite image of the tropical Atlantic. Here's the two systems out nearest the islands. That one didn't look all that bad. It's just small. There's a lot of dry air surrounding both of those. And now this one that's coming off already has the circulation, obviously, and we have advisories on it. So with that, what you got for insight over there from Dothan, Alabama, David?
Yeah, y'all can hear me now?
Yes. Good morning, David. David Paul, Chief Meteorologist, TVY. Good morning, David.
Good morning. Yeah, I think our biggest concern here is going to be the tornado threat that develops tomorrow as what's left of Francine moves northward. You know, it's interesting looking at the tracks of the various models because the GFS and the Euro are kind of on the western side of that cone. And then a lot of the hurricane-specific models and some of the short-range models are more to the east. And it's a subtle difference. Is it Morgan City? Is it south of Houma for landfall? But down the road, does the center go somewhere west of I-55, somewhere east of I-55? And that translates into some impacts here. So I'm kind of concerned tomorrow with that low-level jet lifting through Alabama. Looks like dew points come up into the middle 70s. And there's going to be pretty good shear and pretty good cape available for these thin-up tornadoes across a good chunk of Alabama tomorrow. And I think that is a concern. And I'm not sure how many people are taking it seriously. I mean, we've been pushing it all week here, but I don't know. I haven't heard anything from the schools really concerned about tomorrow. So we'll see how that unfolds.
Yeah, I neglected to even look at SPC's stuff. It's the trouble with being an old retiree. You start leaving stuff out. That's a good point. That dry slot and the shear, unless it's very warm aloft, will be a contributing factor.
Yeah, SPC did upgrade a good chunk of Alabama to a slight risk. They had a marginal risk as of yesterday. So I think that's good. It's important, I think, to have that slight risk out because so many people will pay attention to that risk outlook from the SPC. And I think getting upgraded to a slight is a good thing. And I remember back in 2021 with Ida, a similar track, you know, a little farther eastward. When that came up through the south, we had a lot of tornadoes here a couple days afterwards. And it looks like a similar type situation, fast-moving, brief, low-end tornadoes, but they can catch people off guard if they're not ready.
Yeah, it'll probably take having a few show ups a day, say in the southeast Louisiana or in Mississippi with the outer rain bands to use as an example. Hey, this is going to be our ball game tomorrow.
Right.
Well, David, you're a good example too of hazards that are outside the cone. We so many people just look at the cone and say that's where the threat is, and we're all practicing our, you know, come on, the real risks sometimes are well outside the cone. That's a great example.
Yeah, no, we got parents in Mississippi too, and they're you know in the cone, but their risk isn't so much the wind; it's that inland flooding threat and the fact that they've been a little wetter there too. And that's what's interesting, I think, as we go through the next 24 hours. You know, a good chunk of Louisiana and Mississippi had pretty good rainfall last week, and a lot of those trees, you know, shallow root systems, kind of a wet ground. You throw on several inches of rain now, and all of a sudden a 50-mile-per-hour wind gust is starting to take down trees and power lines. So I think that threat inland will be a little more significant due to the rain last week.
Have you seen many come in from the southwest like this where you are in Dothan? Is this something that you've seen much of in your career there?
You know, not as often, I guess. You know, so many times we kind of see the storms come in right from the south or some glancing blows from the southeast. But it's amazing, even though we're, you know, several hundred miles away, the impacts still carry so far away from where that center is as you go through time. And usually it's just like a little sliver of instability and winds that come in. So, yeah, anytime we see a storm west of us that crosses somewhere in Louisiana and moves northward, we're always on guard for the potential tornado risk more than anything else.
Interesting. How can you hear us out there, Dr. Howe? Are you I see the water rushing over the rocks there. How can you hear us?
Hey, Tim, could you repeat that, Tim?
No, I was just going to see if you can hear what we're talking about. If you have any questions for David, because it's you're right there looking at the water coming over the. I don't know if that's is that the jetty or where you are there, but David's talking about the risk of tornadoes in over into Alabama and stuff. Do you have any thoughts or questions?
Tim, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you a little bit. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. That's okay. We'll come back to you in a little bit. So it's a tough spot out there. It's a great spot, but a tough spot. So David, how far inland from the coast is Dothan? I see it on a map, but I don't have a good feel for it.
Yeah, right. Dothan's the far southeast corner of Alabama. We're about 75 miles from the coast, down to the southwest of us. So just far enough inland to be buffered from usually the strongest winds of a hurricane, but we're usually in that prime zone for the spin-up tornadoes. And, you go a little bit west of us and it may be pretty robust tomorrow. And it's weird through here, more so, I was in Louisiana for 10 years before coming here, and we had tornadoes that would spin up, but it seems to happen a little more often here. And I'm not sure if it's because of the geography. South Louisiana is so flat. And then you get from the coastline from Panama City northward, you've got some rolling hills and a much more significant elevation change that might, I think, add some helicity to the atmosphere. So a little more robust, brief spin-ups here. It's kind of an interesting, local dynamic that I've noticed.
That is interesting. Yeah, it's just far enough inland. You're about as far inland as I am right now in South Texas, and for us it's the gradient of the rainfall yesterday. I mean, Brownsville, which is 20 miles from the coast, had 7.5 inches, and where I am, about 70 miles inland, we had 0. So wow, contrast is sharp. I see Hal on camera now. How can you hear us now?
Yeah, Tim, I think I can hear you better now. Sorry about that. It was a little bit hard. Maybe I was too close to the waves. That might have been the problem.
Well, we're talking. I don't know if you can hear what David was saying, but his biggest risk in Southeast Alabama is probably the tornado risk. I think where you are, that's not so much of a threat. You're on the other side, and it doesn't seem to be a problem where you are on the Gulf Coast.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly it, Tim. And it surprises people. A lot of people expect to see those tornadoes even near the eye or near the eye wall. They're typically, like David was saying, very far east of the track. So the concern would be more, I think, especially like Mississippi and even Alabama, and those bands that develop often even after landfall, those long bands well to the right of landfall. That's, I think, typically where we'd see the tornadoes.
Which is right where David's sitting. So, yeah. Bill, jump back in. We're just trying to keep the conversation going here. I think that Hurricane Center did upgrade their forecast again to call for a Cat 2 at landfall. I believe that's what I saw. Is that right? 85 knot winds?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, again, it's 5 knots one way or another is not going to make a major change. I think that brings up another thing that I neglected to talk about is it's moving inland at a faster speed than is typical, I think, in the Gulf Coast. So the penetration of damaging winds could go farther inland. It all kind of depends on whether the dynamic forcing is gone into a hard weakening trend at the time.
Did you see at one point yesterday, we were watching the eye on the radar here on the Brownsville radar. The eye, it wasn't even an eye. The circulation was about 80 miles wide from the radar band, if you will. And then finally about 7 o'clock last night, you saw a little eye develop up here in the corner. And that's about the time it started intensifying. But at one point, it was not impressive on radar. Satellite looked pretty good, but when that big burst of convection took off to the north, it looked like it was falling apart. Then it regenerated pretty quickly.
Yeah. I flew a storm that had like that. They really didn't have an eye wall; it just had a big center, and the winds were pretty strong in it. And back then we were flying it at below 1,000 feet, and we actually had to go find a rain shower to get the salt off the windows.
Wow, interesting. So, David, what's your timeline look like? When are you looking at the worst for you guys?
Yeah, it looks like we've got some showers out there today, but everything today is pretty light. We should see a pretty good band come in tomorrow morning, probably between 4 and 8 a.m. The initial band of moisture Francine. And then as we go through tomorrow, there's really going to be a big increase in instability. That's when that low-level jet comes down through. So I'm thinking after 9 a.m. until probably 5, 6 p.m., any of those cells that form, Bill was showing that punch of drier air on the GFS coming in, right ahead of that punch of dry air, you've got that sliver of deeper moisture. And I think those are the cells that pop up during the day tomorrow that will be rotating. And I have a feeling that you're going to have a lot more rotation, where I think tomorrow every single cell out there might want to rotate. And the question is how many of those will spin down and actually reach the ground and produce weak tornadoes. But a daytime event for us, I guess that's good. We've seen so many nighttime events here. But, yeah, late morning, midday, afternoon, just ahead of that punch of dry air aloft, I think these cells are going to be spinning pretty good. And I hope people are ready. I hope the schools are ready. And it's, again, going back to, the forecast track, those subtle differences, I think that's what the HER right there. So the HER is a little more east than, say, the GFS or the Euro, with the center and that plume of instability tomorrow. But that, what you're seeing there on the screen is, that sliver is in the western part and the southern part of our viewing area. We go down to our tower is in Florida in the Panhandle. So on the antenna, we cover from Destin to Panama City, northward up to a little south of Montgomery, and then west to about I-65, Covington County. So certainly that little sliver of instability right there, it's subtle, but, low LCLs tomorrow, dew points may pop to 75, and that low-level rotation, if the cloud base is really low in the sky, it doesn't take much to get that rotation down to the ground. And I think we're going to see that tomorrow, very low cloud heights.
Yeah, they're the quick and dirty ones that are hard to capture in advance radar because they're spinning up from down low and then expanding.
We have a good camera network here, which is really important on days like this. Back in 2021 with the remnants of Ida, we were able to catch a few different tornadoes on the live cams and track them. And there was one that we were tracking. It was west of Dothan. It ended up going up towards Midland City, and we could zoom in the camera and we could actually see from about 7 miles away a trampoline being picked up into the sky from that camera being zoomed in. So a day like tomorrow, those live cams are, probably the best tools out there. Radar is good, but again, your beam height very quickly goes up above where that main rotation is. So without seeing the actual sky on camera or in person, you kind of miss some of those brief spin-ups.
Yeah. Well, I see what you mean about the dew points. It's a tongue of really high dew points coming in there on the forecast. Yeah.
It's incredible, that dew point. Every degree of the dew point going up just increases that cape and just adds that instability. And sometimes the difference between a 72 and a 75 dew point is the difference between getting a spin up or not getting one. Especially through here, it's very, subtle differences really, end up being big differences when it plays out in real life.
That's a nasty looking sounding.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the photographs, some of the photographs, just watching this for the last few days have been pretty incredible. The NAM is always kind of crazy when it comes to photographs, but some of those were pretty crazy. But now getting into the short-term models and just watching that rotation potential in the atmosphere is pretty impressive. And again, around here, it's a little different than farther inland. It seems like high shear, low cape will be enough. And I think tomorrow we'll see some of these cells that don't even have lightning. They won't even be thunderstorms technically. They'll be showers, and you'll have these showers with little hooks and decent rotation and perhaps some spin-up tornadoes from just showers.
Yeah, I've worked a number of events where the incredible shear down low was easily able to tap into what little instability there was and spawn tornadoes. Well, good luck with that.
Yeah. Guys, I think what do you guys? So, what do you guys think of the model differences, looking at the global versus the hurricane models and some of the HER and the RAF, the differences in track? The global models seem to be a little more west than the other models that are east.
Yeah, I haven't looked that far east as you guys, but for the Western Gulf, in recent years, there's definitely been a bias towards the west on the forecasts from the global models. And I asked somebody involved in the modeling process if they knew why, and I didn't get an answer. So I think it's still to be determined. I don't know if there's a bias in the storm ones. They tend to be a lot noisier from run to run than the global ones in my subjective view of them. So I don't know so much if there's a bias as much as there is. It gets noisy, especially as you get out in the latter time frames.
Right.
I think, guys, one of the things we're talking about, one of the points that they're trying to make so vividly, this not model specifically, but one of the discussions at the conference this year was about, again, the risks outside the cone. And I think today is a great example where we've got David in Southeast Alabama, Hal in Galveston, both outside the cone, but yet both dealing with the issue. There's the cone, and David's down, where we see it on the map there, Southeast Alabama, and Hal's in Galveston, both well outside the cone, yet both experiencing impacts from this, and even outside the warning areas, because the impact is so much bigger than what we talked about. And how there in Galveston, I mean, obviously you're seeing impacts. You're not going to see tornadoes. You're seeing a pretty good tide, but even though the storm is well to your east, you're still seeing impacts there.
Yeah, and Tim, what's interesting when you get into island life here, everyone will tell you that the fatality total that trumps everything beyond floods, hurricanes, winter events, it's rip currents. And so it's, people getting sucked out in these rip currents when they come down to the coast. So if you're in Dallas or Houston and you see, hey, the storm missed, it's going to Louisiana, let's go to the beach. You see people sometimes out here on these days getting out here saying, yeah, there's some waves out there, maybe we'll go boogie boarding, and all of a sudden they disappear in a rip current. So even though we're outside the warning area, when you get the rough surf like this, up along these rock groins and rock jetties, you get really, really strong rips. And sometimes you'll see fatalities for something like that you wouldn't even see from a wind event if you're on the fringe like that.
Yeah.
And likewise on the other side, David, do you have any problem getting people to go, hey, pay attention? This thing's a long way away, but it's not.
Yeah, we do, a lot of stations do first alert days. We do forewarned weather days because first alert was taken in this market. So we don't do those very often. We're pretty stingy with issuing those days, but we did a forewarned weather day for tomorrow back on Monday. And we do that because in the past year, we started doing this. We've gotten people's attention where, hey, if there's a forewarned weather day, it means business because we don't issue these very often. When we do, people see the results. So, yeah, the confidence for us was high enough back on Monday to put out that forewarned weather day for tomorrow to highlight that chance for tornadoes. And we've been pushing that to get people to pay attention. I think we see it more if the schools start canceling, then we know we really hit some important people with that message. Like I said, we haven't seen that yet. But I think the general audience is alert to the fact that tomorrow is going to be important when it comes to tornadoes. And, we'll see what the schools do. Of course, if you all remember back in March of 2007, Enterprise High School got hit by a tornado during the day. It was a, springtime March 1st event. There was a moderate risk out that day, but 8 students were killed in that high school when that tornado hit. So ever since then, this area in particular has been hypersensitive to tornadoes and the school day. And usually they end up canceling class if there is a decent tornado risk. So we'll see if that message is really reaching those superintendents and those that are making those decisions for tomorrow, because I think there's just enough of a risk here where, I think we're going to see some tornadoes, and I'm not sure if people are totally ready.
I think that's a good point. Messaging is what it's all about. That's difficult to get that point out. Let's take a quick sponsor break, and then we'll come back and kind of wrap up the conversation today. But just thank our sponsors who make this program a possibility each and every week. Of course, at the very top is USAA. USA, thank you for what you do to make this show a reality and our in-person conference in April. South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, thank you to you for the information that you give us and get us all set up there each year during the month of April. We just got the link for the hotel setup for 2025, so we'll be giving that to you relatively soon as well. Of course, the weather company, Weather Call, Weather Boy, all folks are part of this, and we appreciate each and every one of them. Bill, let me come back to you and just give us some thoughts on what we're seeing today and where we're headed from here.
Okay, well, from a forecaster point of view, it's been a fairly well-behaved storm, and it's allowed for consistency. This is a new way the Hurricane Center wants to project to get that idea of outside the cone impacts for at least the wind warning parts of a tropical cyclone, with both tornado warnings, tropical storm warnings, and corresponding watches also being highlighted. I'd hope someday they might be able to get bandwidth enough, since it gets hit a lot, to have it interactive where you zoom in and can mouse over to find out all the elements of impact that are expected in the area in there. But it's a great step forward, I hope. And we look forward to people's feedback. This is the first storm we've had a good example for that.
Yeah, it's a messy map, but I think it's effective because you really do get the idea that there's so much more than just the cone. David, have you seen this and been able to utilize the benefits of this yet?
And not too much. I've seen it. I haven't really dug into it too deeply. I guess this is really, like Bill said, the first time that we've had a good opportunity to see it. So I think we'll be learning some as we go today and tomorrow.
I do agree. A zoom in and a mouse over would be really nice. That would be really helpful. But it's first iteration of this. So hopefully we'll see this continue to evolve and improve, and something we can all use on our own websites as well. That would be nice. Hal, what do you want? Last.
I want to touch on something Hal said.
Go ahead, David.
I want to touch on something Hal said real quick about the surge. I'm not sure of the exact stats, but the Mobile National Weather Service area, which covers Mobile, parts of Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle, their number one killer has been fatalities from rip currents over the past several years. And we've seen a lot of that in the past few months in the Florida Panhandle as well. People coming to the coast, not aware of what a rip current is. They spent a lot of money to get there. They traveled 1,000 miles. They want to go in the water no matter what, even if double red flags are flying. And that rip current risk is huge. And I hope people today along the coast of Alabama and Florida are paying attention and listening to those flags.
Good thoughts. Hal, Galveston, any last thoughts from down there?
In closing, Tim, I just wanted to ask a quick question. Maybe I don't know if Bill would be the best person or David. A storm like this, unusual for it to form in the extreme southwestern Gulf of Mexico. Would we normally expect storms like this to ingest a lot of dry air? I mean, just because they're so close to those Mexican deserts, like climatologically, is this a pretty normal thing, or did it ingest a lot more dry air than we typically see?
It kind of depends. Even a storm coming in from the southeast, like Hurricane Allen back in 1980, it weakened right before landfall, as a lot of dry air from the Mexican plateau was ingested into the circulation. So I wouldn't be surprised if especially ones that are trying to move north, because there's probably a westerly component of the flow just to their west that could bring that dry air in there.
I think Tim Smith knew that, and he said, "I want to live in the valley, so this dry air can knock down the hurricanes in our region."
It seems to be working. It's worked a lot. Absolutely. And this is more typical of a June storm than a September storm, is it not, Bill?
Hurricane Audrey formed in June down in the Bay of Campeche.
Yeah, and Brett was like that. It formed.
Picked up by a springtime shortwave and raced northward from there.
So well, we learned it's been a weird season all the way around.
Bill, can you unshare your screen?
Sorry about that.
No, it's actually a great graphic, but yeah, but it's been it's a weird season to begin with, and we're just past the peak, and it's somewhat active out there. I don't know, what's going to happen the next 2 months? Do you think because this season's been so unusual, and anybody can jump in on this, but expected to be very active, and it's been modestly so. Will it go longer? Will the season go longer than usual? Well, I typically hear where we are in South Texas, once we get to October 1st, we figure we're done, even though the season goes till the end of November. We figure we're done. Do you think that we're going to see an unusual October, November? Anybody? Bill, David, Hal?
Even if after a few drinks, I wouldn't speculate out that far in time. I leave that to Phil and his colleagues.
I will say I'm encouraged by the fact the Gulf water temperatures are coming down. If you go back a couple weeks ago, there were some buoys offshore of Louisiana that were at 89, 90 degrees, and those came down into the middle 80s because we had that lingering unsettled area last week. So that, and then the combination of some upwelling here from Francine, that should help quite a bit. I go back to 2018 when we had Michael. That was a fall where, man, that ridge over the Gulf did not want to give up. We had 90s every single day through the middle of October, and the Gulf just was acting like August in October. So at least we've had some mixing of the waters out there, and maybe it won't be quite as robust, knock on wood, compared to some years in the past.
Yeah, Tim, I was concerned a few years ago when we saw Hurricane Delta fringe Texas here. What was it, October 9th or 10th? I mean, usually when we get into October, you think the season's pretty much wrapped up in Texas, but reminds you that there are outliers and you never quite know where the edge of that envelope is.
Well, good stuff, guys. Appreciate all the time this morning. David, thanks for jumping in. I know you're going to be busy the next couple of days. Try to get some sleep while you can, because maybe a long day for you tomorrow.
Yep, good to be here.
Yeah, and Hal, thanks for walking out to or riding your bike out to the seawall, however you got there to the water. We appreciate that. It's a great video out there this morning.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. Thanks for dealing with my audio and tech issues. Whoa, there's a massive surge rolling in. I don't know if I can get that one on camera, but my feet are wet.
Put your water shoes on. Put your water shoes on. Bill, you're a little farther inland. You're safe from this one, but thanks for your time this morning as well.
Yep, don't have to test my fortified roof yet.
All right, guys. Thanks, guys. We appreciate it. Thanks to our sponsors, the USAA, of course, South Florida Island Convention, the Visitors Bureau, the Weather Company, Weather Boy, Weather Call, all making these shows a reality. We appreciate that. All right, we should be back next week, but in the meantime, everybody stay safe out there, especially David and Hal. Keep speed right off. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.